greener?
Meal should be greener because green is a healthy thing. And what you mean by green has to be explained. Green means you are including something which is grown naturally, which doesn't require much of efforts to harvest, and which doesn't require much of fertilizers, much of pesticides, and usually it is locally available. So once you have that kind of a substance, usually it's vegetables, and I'm not saying tubers like potatoes and yam and sweet potatoes, but green leafy vegetables or green vegetables like okra or beans. Once you start eating that, there are two distinct advantages. They are full of vitamins and minerals, and secondly, they require much more energy to get digested. So your net absorption is linked with whatever is your activity levels, so that you get enough food but you can't overeat them. So that is the advantage of eating that. So it's healthy for you and healthy for the soil, healthy for the environment.
So are you suggesting that going green in terms of food is better for our environment?
Yeah, surely, because once you start harvesting a lot of carbohydrate rich foods like rice, wheat, corn, the crop is so much in quantity that ultimately you have to process it, and the processed food itself causes health hazards. Secondly, to cultivate these crops, we have to burn and knock down a lot of trees. So we lose green cover, or they are called as the lungs of our earth. So if we lose them, imagine what will happen if you are deprived of oxygen. The same thing happens for our earth. And thirdly, if you are, say, creating a lot of animal food, so to feed those animals, you have to use a lot of grass. Usually they are the grass eaters which are eaten, and to cultivate that kind of a grass, again the jungles or the forests are denuded, and that's why you have a double whammy, that you are losing our green cover, our lungs, and so imagine a creature who is going with very small lungs, how fit he will be. So that is what is happening when we do that, when we use animal products or these bumper crops.
Have you changed your diet to a more eco-friendly one?
Yeah, because there are two reasons. One is before I became aware of these environmental hazards of not being green, or you can say your diet is yellow or red, I realized that being green in diet is much more helpful for living longer and living a healthier life. Because if you look at the national and international statistics, every third Indian and maybe every fifth world population is becoming diabetic, or they are suffering from heart disease or cholesterol problems, and the biggest hazard is cancer. And these are basically originating from the substances that we eat through the non-green revolution. And we are spending a lot of money, our national resources, to treat these diseases. So initially we are trying to destroy our environment by not being green. Secondly, we are destroying our health by not being green. And once I realized that, and as I am a doctor, I not only changed my own diet, but I almost insist, and people call me a fanatic, to promote healthy foods and green foods.
So since you have already been following this green meal concept, so what benefits have you observed of this green diet?
See, the benefits of green diet, basically if you look at the physiological functions of our body, they are mainly, you should be optimally hungry, not too much, not too less. Then your sleep should be normal, and your stool should be normal. Then your activity should be normal, and you will have a vigor to live, and you should be looking forward to the day ahead. And this all happens if you are consuming green food. So that is the biggest advantage of being green towards our own health. Secondly, uh, the green food usually takes lesser time to cook because it maybe only 10 minutes to cook. It requires much lesser fossil fuels. Then thirdly, your water to wash these things, water to cater to all these things which are like food, and aftermaths of eating that are much lesser. So we are conserving your health, conserving water, and conserving your greenery on your earth. So they are the advantages. Looking at it like, you can say, for your personal gains, for your society, and for your environment in general, the green foods are much healthier.
Okay, so are there any disadvantages of eating vegetarian or green?
Yes, there are some disadvantages. Like if you eat purely vegan foods and avoid milk, or avoid say B12 rich foods, then you get B12 deficiency, and B12 deficiency usually leads to a less amount of your cognition or the brain power. So your memory may be affected, your other cognitive skills are affected, and if once the cognition is affected, the way you look at the world is affected, because your perception of the world changes. That doesn't mean that you have to eat non-vegetarian foods, but locally grown foods and some amount of fermented foods should be available, and milk without boiling it too much. So if you stick to Pasteur's technique, that is boiling milk only to 70 degrees and then bringing it back down, and use milk only when you require, take it out from fridge and then use the smallest quantity, don't heat it too much. Then eating green leafy vegetables which are not too sterile, because every vegetable, green vegetable, has got a surface bacteria, and all bacteria are not bad. So those bacteria are required. Thirdly, being vegetarian and being under pressure will cause a lot of acidity which destroys that B12. So that is one aspect of, or one disadvantage of being vegetarian. Secondly, usually vegetarians get much lesser proteins in their diet. So you require larger amount of proteins. Usually we require around 1 gram per kilogram body weight of protein. So suppose you are 60 kg, so you require 60 grams of protein minimum. And our vegetable diet, vegetarian diet, have much lesser proteins than that if you are restricting your quantity of food. But there are tricks. That doesn't mean you have to be non-vegetarian. There are now, with food technology being so advanced, you can have a lot of isolated proteins which are available, but they should be included in our diet. Like spices. We include spices in our diet for various health reasons. Similarly, this should be a part of your diet. Then your vitamin B12 deficiency, iron deficiency, all those deficiencies which are usually common with vegetarian diets can be avoided.
So is being a vegetarian cheaper or more expensive?
It depends on which area of the world you are living. Suppose you are living in a village where you have a small house but a larger, say, a farm. Then these vegetables are grown on the farm without much efforts and without much cost. Then the vegetarianism is cheaper. But suppose you are living in an industrial area where everything is, say, transported from far distances. Then what happens is your vegetarian, or being a vegetarian, becomes much costlier. That's what happens in Western countries, where the meat is produced in such large quantities and it's offered with subsidies. So people eat much more meat, which is much cheaper than buying vegetables or fruits. So it depends on where you are staying. If you talk of our country, we have got a large areas of farms where on the sides of it vegetables can be grown. So instead of putting in fences, we can put natural fences of vegetables. Even you can use your kitchen garden, even you can use your, say, terrace garden, balcony gardens, and you can grow a lot of vegetables. There is a technique called hydroponics, where all the vegetables which are required can be grown in sufficient quantities for the family without using much larger quantities of water. So minimum water, use the hydroponics technique, and you can grow your own vegetables which are without pesticides, without fertilizers, and excellent in taste. You won't believe me if you eat even spinach. Have you eaten spinach any time? Raw. Raw spinach. Once you eat that spinach or any leaf, suppose say lemon, chili, anything that is grown in hydroponic gardens, you will never touch any other food that are so tasty. And be assured that I have tasted it, various kinds of vegetables and fruits, but what we taste today in cities is like 1% to 2% of what natural taste that God has given us. So at least once you should taste these natural foods, and then you will realize the taste of it. Well, ultimately we live for enjoyment, we live for happiness, and that will come from this green revolution.
So what would you like to suggest our viewers, like, as a conclusion of this?
Usually I will give only one advice, that being non-vegetarian is not bad, being vegetarian is not too good, but slowly we have to shift from a non-vegetarianism to a minimum non-vegetarian food, and larger quantities of our diet should be vegetarian. Secondly, we have to change our paradigm or outlook, that all those products which are available, which are like food concentrates, can be used wisely to enhance our food so that we don't have any deficiencies. So be open to new things and be wise about the old things. So if you can combine this to form your own wisdom about food, then we can live a very healthy and happy life.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir.